It was already the dead of night when the grave robber made his way through the wrought iron gates of the cemetery. He had a shovel in one hand and a worn Hessian sack slung over his shoulder. He knew that in his grisly trade, tonight would be a profitable one, and on that, he was right, just not in the way he expected. The grave robber tramped across the grass, surrounded on all sides by headstones, some fresh, some ancient. He whistled a merry tune to himself. If he was afraid of ghosts, this was a line of work that he would never have gotten into. It didn't take him long to find the grave he was looking for, that of a wealthy old woman he'd seen in the obits, a daily ritual that he'd taken to privately referring to as reading the menu. When he found the old bag's grave, he wasted no time digging down through the freshly tamped earth. No matter how many times they'd heard the old cliché, "You can't take it with you," in the grave robber's experience, people like this always tried. He'd surely find a wealth of antique jewelry in her coffin, along with her priceless family heirlooms. Well, priceless until he took them all to the local pawn shop and found out how much Vinny was willing to pay for them. He was an industrious digger, and soon the tip of his shovel came into contact with the hard wood of the ornate coffin lid. Beautiful. He cleared the rest of the dirt off the coffin lid and pulled out the small crowbar from his belt to loosen it. As expected, inside he found the desiccated body of a wealthy old lady in an elegant dress. But she didn't seem to have any jewelry. No rings, finger or ear, no necklace, no fancy brooch, nothing. Nada. El Zilcho. The grave robber was ready to call this whole thing a bust, until he noticed something glimmering in the old woman's clenched fist, a flash of silver. He had no shame whatsoever prying open the woman's death grip and discovering what appeared to be a rectangle made of silver foil. But the second it was in his hands, he vanished into thin air in that open grave, the piece of silver foil disappearing with him. Many centuries before this, in some far-flung battlefield, one Viking clan was waging war on another. A Viking warrior woman was in the thick of it, swinging with her great axe into the body of any enemy who was unlucky enough to be nearby. What glory it gave her to offer up these souls to Valhalla. She'd rip and tear until it was all over and done with, and she could drink a toast to victory from her wine bladder atop a pile of enemy corpses. The warrior woman sliced down foe after foe with devastating power. Her father had taught her well. While Odin had not seen fit to deliver him a son, despite his best efforts, he decided that he would not let that stop him from siring a great and terrible force on the battlefield. The Vikings have always been rather equal opportunity when it comes to both giving and receiving violence. In the heat of battle, the warrior woman saw her greatest enemy, Harald the Black-Toothed, so named for his atrocious oral hygiene habits. The same Harald the Black-Toothed who had cowardly murdered her father with an arrow to the back of the head during peacetime. It was a death so dishonorable, her father would never be able to join the fabled feasting hall of Valhalla. For that, she would make him pay dearly. The warrior woman ran straight towards Harald, as straight and true as the arrow that had slain her beloved father. She roared for him to face her, and when he did, she swung an axe towards that very face. But Harald was a tricky one. He ducked out of the way, and with one of his keenly sharpened short swords, he sliced the wooden handle of the warrior woman's great axe, the axe head tumbling to the ground. But this was a boon, in a way. It gave her the opportunity to give this wretch a much more meaningful death. The warrior woman reached back and drew the sword that she had sheathed and strapped across her back. Her ancestral sword, her father's sword, and his father's before him, passed down across generations. This would be the perfect sword for her to send Harald the Black-Toothed to his ultimate reward. The battle was hard fought. Even though Harald was a coward and a snake, he was skilled in the art of the blade, but the warrior woman was able to kill him in the end. As she stood over his body, panting and bleeding, the battle around her wound down as her compatriots slaughtered the rest of their foes. And to the purse of the victors went the spoils. It wouldn't be a Viking conquest without a little looting of the dead afterwards. And as the warrior woman searched the body of her fallen enemy, she noticed something strange, a rectangle of glowing silver. She grabbed it to study it closer, only to vanish from the battlefield a moment later, never to be seen again. Several hundred years after this, a monstrous killer stalks the streets of foggy London town, decked in a long black cloak and a top hat. the image of the perfect gentleman hiding unimaginable darkness underneath this classy visage. He glides through the streets, a bat out of hell, unafraid, despite the posters all around warning that Saucy Jack could be anywhere, eager to claim his next victim. He can't help but laugh when he sees the police sketches. It looks nothing like him. While all those buffoons at Scotland Yard bumble their way through the evidence, Jack danced across the wet cobblestones of Whitechapel, searching for ladies of the evening to satisfy the terrible vices lurking in his black heart. It didn't take him long to find a woman on the street corner wearing a red dress, with a gaunt face and wet, soulful eyes that excited all of his terrible desires. Yes, she would be the one tonight. He charmed her with sweet words and golden coins, telling her it was dangerous for a woman like her to linger on the streets with a killer on the loose. Perhaps she could come and spend the night at his flat in the city. It was much warmer there than out here, after all. Of course, desperate people never require much convincing. It didn't take long for him to spirit her away back to his secluded apartment, and by the time she saw him draw the nickel-plated Liston knife from his coat, it was already too late to escape. He spent the next few hours exploring every inch of her with that knife, and once he felt he'd gotten his money's worth out of her, so to speak, he returned to the foggy streets to dump her body, where it would be found in the cold light of the day. The murders thrilled him, of course, but he was almost more excited to see the next morning's headlines. All the penny dreadfuls painting him as some borderline supernatural beast, as deadly as a sharpened blade and impossible to catch as a thin mist hanging in the air. It was all so flattering. As he was preparing to leave for the night and get some rest, his arms always got tired after the strenuous work of the deed, Jack noticed something fluttering through the breeze nearby. Some strange piece of weightless silver. A shred of foil. How odd. He reached out with one of his dexterous, blood-stained hands and snatched it from the air to get a closer look. And despite what all the yellow papers and penny dreadfuls had said, that moment was the only time when Jack the Ripper truly did disappear from the streets of Whitechapel. In the modern day, across the channel, a street mime performed for loose change and a hat on the streets of Paris, perhaps the only city in the world where the art of miming was actually respected. In theory, anyway. He'd noticed that this newer generation didn't have the same respect for the miming arts as those that had come before. He blamed social media, not that you'd ever hear him talk about it. Out in the public, you'd never ever hear him talk. People ignored him like a leper on the street corner as he climbed an invisible stepladder through the pure medium of physical acting. Maybe he needed something a little more action-packed. He pretended to be a soldier on the front lines of a war, impeccably shouldering his invisible assault rifle, complete with bracing for realistic recoil with every shot, as he assumed a military stance and prowled on the spot. Soon, in what he thought was a truly emotionally devastating moment, he took an imaginary shot to the neck. He collapsed to the Paris streets, miming his death throes as he bled out in an absence of blood. The intensity of it was so great that his beret almost fell off. And still, it seemed as though the sympathies of the faceless throngs of commuters and tourists were not stirred. Had all of his life, his idolization of Marcel Marceau, his time studying at l'École Internationale de Théâtre Jacques Lecoq, been a waste? Perhaps he'd cry if it wouldn't smear his perfect white makeup. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a figure passed by him, moving so quickly that the mime couldn't get a good look at him. But what the mime could see well enough was the strip of silver drifting down into the hat he'd left out for tips. Some kind of invitation, or a ticket perhaps. With the practiced physical theatricality one could only expect from an expert mime, he reached into the hat with his gloved hand and picked the ticket up, only to vanish from the Paris streets, where sadly, nobody would ever notice his absence. Washington, D.C., mid-1960s, the bubbling apex of Cold War paranoia. It seems that everyone is on edge, expecting invasion or outright nuclear devastation at any moment. All except one D.C. politician, who was being led to an expensive hotel room by his tie. The person leading being a beautiful blonde woman in a cocktail dress, giving him bedroom eyes. He's had the most incredible night, and yet, somehow, it seems like it's about to get even better. Still, stumbling and staggering from all the martinis he'd knocked back while living it up with this beautiful stranger at the bar, he hoped he'd still be with it enough to perform. Little did he know, the drugs that the beautiful stranger had slipped him were already taking effect. She'd get exactly what she wanted from him, and she didn't need any kind of conscience to do it. Smash cut forward an hour when the politician is passed out on the luxurious hotel bed, while the beautiful stranger sits at a nearby desk, speaking Russian into a transceiver. She was what an intelligence service would call a swallow, a female spy specialized in obtaining information from key targets with the subtle weapon of seduction, rather than standard infiltration or violence. The male Casanova counterpart is called a raven, in case you were wondering. The politician had been exceptionally talkative back at the bar. The more drinks he knocked back, the more secrets about the military subcommittee he was working on he seemed to spill. How generous of him. As the swallow gave this vital information to her handler, she couldn't help but smile at the fact that her gentleman companion's loose lips were about to sink many American ships. Needless to say, her handler was pleased with the information she'd received, but since she had a key U.S. political asset unconscious, she should see if she could get anything else as a bonus. She didn't have to be told twice. The swallow began searching the politician's clothes for anything else she could use. Some note, some memo, some key or keycard, anything that would further her motherland's goals. Sadly, it didn't seem like he'd had anything interesting on his person until she saw a glint of silver in the inner breast pocket of his coat. Perhaps that could be of interest. She reached out and slid it free, only to vanish from the hotel room. The politician would wake up in the morning and have no idea what the hell happened. Someone who was all too keenly aware of what was happening to him was Joey the Mouth, a small-time enforcer for the New Jersey mafia who'd lived up to his name by turning pigeon for the FBI. Now, he was on the back of the yacht of his former friend and boss, Big Tony, who, along with his goons, was pointing a Glock at Joey. Right about now, he was really regretting not taking that offer to go into witness protection when it was given to him. The gangster life was just so hard to give up. And now it seemed like he was going to die a gangster's death for his trouble. Big Tony didn't want to hear any of the rat's excuses. He'd been lied to and deceived by this little creep for years, giving him a seat at his table while he'd been selling him out to the feds under the table. It was a repulsive breach of the principles of omerta, and for that kind of transgression, the only possible punishment was death. Joey, still thinking there was some hope of him getting out of this, tried to reason with Big Tony, and he was met with a reply of hot lead from Tony and his goons. The rat's body collapsed back into the ocean and sank beneath the waves as the water around him turned red. Another leak in the organization plugged, as much as it always secretly pained Big Tony to execute a man he would have once called one of his best friends. No honor among thieves. Just as Big Tony was about to order his goons to turn the yacht around back to the nearest New Jersey port, he caught something glinting in the sunlight as it fluttered down towards him. Instinctively, being a man who'd always taken what he wanted in life, he reached out and grabbed it, only to disappear from the yacht right before the eyes of his baffled mooks. But the gangsters weren't the only gunslingers who were about to receive a surprise. 150 years prior, two cowboy gunslingers were about to prove that this one-horse town wasn't big enough for the both of them. They stood outside the Snakebite Saloon, itchy hands lingering above the grips of their revolvers. This feud had been coming to a head for years, and deep down, they all knew that it would inevitably end like this. They'd run with different gangs, rustling cattle and shaking down stagecoaches and, later, trains. They'd lost money to one another on gambling schemes. They'd been rivals in love, fighting over women that they'd both fallen for. In gunslinging battles before, they'd even murdered one another's friends. Now, if the extended blood feud was to end, one of their bloods would need to be spilled. But whose would it be? Who would prove himself to be the fastest hand in the West? In the decisive moment, as the two cowboys stared into one another's eyes, they went for their weapons. Only a hummingbird could have seen the finer details. Both cleared leather, but only one of the two guns was fired. One cowboy fell, a bullet wound in his heart, and a trickle of blood climbing down his shirt as he fell to the ground, darkness claiming him. The surviving cowboy walked over and kicked dust onto his boots, an old cowboy dueling ritual, a sign of respect that let the dead gunslinger's soul pass on to heaven. In death, their feud could be put to rest. Though the cowboy noticed something strange about his dead enemy's left boot, something seemed to be sticking out of the heel. a piece of foil, shimmering silver. Letting his curiosity get the better of him, he leaned in to pick it up, and just as quickly, he was gone. From a void somewhere outside of time and space, 7 people suddenly appeared. The grave robber, the warrior woman, Jack the Ripper, the Parisian street mime, the swallow, Big Tony, and the cowboy. None of them had any natural reason to know each other, separated by time and space and lifestyle, and yet, here they all were, standing together in the dark. Before any of them could think to ask each other what was going on, the lights went up, revealing that they were all standing in a place that none of them could really imagine. The inside of what seemed like a vast factory, but it was unlike any factory that any of them had ever seen. A technicolor assault on the senses, like the vomit you'd produce after eating 5 bags of Skittles and washing it down with the fluid from several cracked glow sticks. Every snaking pipe was covered in polka dots or candy cane stripes. The ground beneath their feet was pillowy pink astroturf. On every side of them, wondrous machines worked to produce impossible toys and candies, sending them down conveyor belts and into boxes marked with the words, Dr. Wondertainment. Short, blue-skinned creatures with bright pink hair, a human-like subspecies known as minkalinkas, worked diligently to ensure that the boxes were properly sealed and sent on their way. Then, in a puff of purple smoke, a theatrical man in a red coat with a black top hat, a cane, and a monocle appeared in front of the 7 assembled strangers. He doffed his cap and bowed to his guests, introducing himself as the whimsical, wacky, and wondrous Dr. Wondertainment. And he'd brought these 7 exceptional people here for one reason: to take an all-access tour around his one-of-a-kind anomalous toy and candy factory, because they'd all been lucky enough to pick up one of his special silver tickets. Naturally, they all had questions, but Dr. Wondertainment encouraged them to save those questions until the end of the tour, because there was so much to see and do. In order to smooth over everyone's confusion at being dragged out of their particular social and historical context, he offered them a bowl of delicious-looking pink bonbons to tide them over, an offer which they, at first, reluctantly obliged. But the second each one of them actually tasted the incredible bonbons, they couldn't resist going back for seconds, and thirds, and even fourths. All the while, Dr. Wondertainment, somewhat nervously, asked them to maybe go steady and save some room for the many other candies they'd all get to sample over the rest of the tour. But it was already too late. While Dr. Wondertainment prepared to sing a song about the power of imagination that he'd co-written with Brian Eno and been practicing for the past several weeks, the anomalous qualities of the bonbons began to take effect on the 7 unlucky guests. If they'd just taken one, yes, they would have experienced pink bubblegum-scented foam leaking from the pores of their abdomen, arms, and back, and yes, this foam would be derived from their blood, but it wouldn't have caused any serious harm. However, death from blood loss did occur in 95% of subjects when they consumed 4 or more of the bonbons, as Dr. Wondertainment quickly realized as the 7 guests he'd traveled across time and space to collect began keeling over on the artificial grass. That's why the Foundation has a containment order on this particular candy referred to as SCP-1079, also known by their official brand name, Dr. Wondertainment's Bubblebath Bonbons. Dr. Wondertainment looked at the 7 exsanguinated corpses lying on the ground in front of him and sighed. What a waste of 7 tickets. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-1550, Dr. Wondertainment's Custom Pets, Top 12 SCP Animals compilation.